The morning in Portland began overcast and quiet. Gray clouds hung low over the trees on the quiet street where the Crow family home stood. The house smelled of freshly brewed coffee and toast. Ethan Crow, a 42-year-old architect, stood at the stove, frying eggs for his family, as he did most mornings. He glanced at the window, where droplets of water trembled on the glass. It had rained overnight, as it often did in Oregon. 12-year-old Lucas sleepily walked into the kitchen, yawning and rubbing his eyes. 15-year-old Sophia followed, slapping her slippers, holding a phone in her hand. Ethan smiled at the children. "Good morning, sleepyhead," he said affectionately to his son and nodded to his daughter. "Breakfast is almost ready." "Hey, Dad," Lucas muttered, sitting down at the table. Sophia only mumbled something, already staring at the phone screen. A few minutes later, Laura, the family's mother, joined them. Laura was 40 and looked impeccably put together, a formal business suit, neat makeup. She worked as a marketing manager for a luxury brand and was always in a hurry in the morning. Ethan put a plate of eggs and toast on the table. "Good morning," he said to his wife, trying to meet her gaze. Laura adjusted her jacket as she walked and checked her phone for messages. She glanced briefly at her husband. "Uh-huh. Morning," she muttered absently. "I'm late for a meeting, so I'll have a quick coffee and run." Ethan looked down at the plates. Not long ago, the whole family would gather together in the mornings for at least a few minutes, joking, discussing the day's plans. Now, Laura was increasingly absorbed in her work, even at breakfast. He pushed a cup of fresh coffee toward her, knowing that she liked it without sugar, with a splash of almond milk. "Thank you," she said without looking up from the screen. The kids were feeling the tension too. Lucas was chatting about an upcoming school project, trying to get his mother's attention. "Mom, we have a science fair at school today, remember? You said maybe you'd come and see." He reminded her uncertainty. Laura frowned, as if trying to remember, and looked at Ethan. "Today? Oh, Lucas, I'm sorry. I have a very important meeting today. I can't do it. Let's do it next time." The boy fell silent in disappointment and buried his face in his plate. Ethan gently touched his son on the shoulder. "I'll definitely come to the fair after lunch, okay? Tell me about your project." He tried to cheer his son up. Lucas nodded, but still looked upset. Sophia, watching this scene, rolled her eyes and muttered, "Work is more important again." Quietly, but loudly enough for the mother to hear. "What did you say?" Laura snapped, looking up from her phone. "Nothing," Sophia shrugged and looked away. There was an awkward silence at the table. Ethan squeezed his daughter's hand in her lap and asked quietly, "Let's not quarrel in the morning. Everyone has a long day today." He tried to speak softly, conciliatorily. Laura sighed and finished her coffee in one gulp. "Okay, I have to go," she said, glancing at her wristwatch. She stood up, kissing her son on the top of his head as she walked and trying to peck her daughter on the cheek, but she turned away under the pretext of drinking juice. The touch was awkward. "I'll be late. I have dinner with clients." Ethan nodded. He wanted to ask if she would be back by nightfall or if she would stay in town, but he kept quiet in front of the children. Laura had been staying late lately, citing work. "Okay, take care of yourself," was all he said after her. When Laura closed the front door, a tense silence fell over the kitchen. Sophia pointedly pushed her plate away. "I'm not hungry," she said, grabbing her backpack and heading for the exit. "I'll go. The bus is coming soon." "Sophia," Ethan began, but his daughter had already run out into the hallway. He sighed heavily. Lucas also stood up from the table, carefully clearing away his dishes. "Dad, Sophia and I really have to go," he said quietly. Ethan nodded, absent-mindedly ruffling his son's blonde hair. "Okay, go ahead. I'll pick you up after school as usual," he replied. The children were gone, and the house was empty. Ethan picked up his half-eaten breakfast, trying to ignore the aching emptiness inside. Mornings like these had become familiar. What had once seemed like a happy, close-knit family was now living as if everyone were on their own. He looked at the family photo hanging on the wall near the refrigerator. He and Laura, still very young, holding 2-year-old Sophia, both laughing. Little Lucas was sitting on Ethan's shoulders next to him. Everyone was so happy, so close. Ethan ran his finger over the faces in the photo, and a lump rose in his throat. He didn't want to accept the fact that their family was falling apart before his eyes, but he didn't know how to restore the old closeness. In that photo, they were in their early 20s. He remembered that day. They went on a family picnic to the Willamette River. Sophia was just learning to run then, and she stomped happily through the grass, while baby Lucas snored on Ethan's shoulders. Laura laughed, trying to catch her daughter, the wind blowing her hair. They were carefree and happy, surrounded by love. Leaving the dirty dishes in the sink for later, Ethan grabbed his blueprint tube and laptop. He would spend the morning working on a small project at home before heading to Lucas's school science fair. His architectural jobs helped him make some money, though he spent most of his time caring for the house and the kids, allowing Laura to pursue her career. As Ethan walked upstairs to his small home office, he thought again about how far apart he and Laura had become. He still loved her, and he wanted her to be happy. But deep down, a worry was growing. What if it wasn't just about work? What if he was losing her for some other reason? The thought was too painful, and he pushed it away, trying to focus on the blueprint he had open on his computer. He had a long day ahead, and he decided to keep himself busy to take his mind off his worries. It was a long evening. After class, Ethan stopped by the school to attend the science fair, as he had promised Lucas. The auditorium, decorated with posters and stands, was bustling with children and parents. Lucas stood at his stand with a project about the solar system, clearly nervous, glancing at the door in the hope of seeing his mother. Ethan noticed the shadow of disappointment in his son's eyes in time and hurried toward him, straightening his shoulders. "Will you show me your work?" he asked cheerfully, approaching Lucas's desk. The boy's face lit up. He began enthusiastically explaining to his father his model of the planets made from foam balls. Ethan listened attentively, asking questions. "You did a great job. And how did you attach Saturn's rings?" "Oh, glue. Very secure." Lucas smiled proudly. Other parents passed by, some taking videos, others calling their wives to come see their child's latest creation. Ethan could feel the stares, probably wondering why Lucas's mother hadn't come. He tried not to show that he was hurt for his son. When the event was over, she and Lucas stopped home for pizza. Sophia, who had returned later on her bus, was waiting for them. She was sitting on the couch with a textbook, but was clearly more occupied with her phone. "Hi," she said, barely glancing at her father and brother. "Mom's not here again?" There was resentment in her voice, although she tried to speak indifferently. Ethan placed the pizza box on the kitchen table. "Mom has work, Soph. She warned me that she had dinner with clients," he answered, trying to speak calmly. Sophia closed the textbook with obvious irritation. "Of course, work. When does she not have it?" The girl got up from the living room and went to the kitchen for a slice of pizza. "You know, Dad, sometimes it feels like we're not her family, but just a backdrop for her career." Ethan's face darkened. It was painful for him to hear this, especially from his daughter. "Don't say that, Sophia. Your mother works very hard so that we have everything, She tries for us," Sophia interrupted wearily. "I hear it all the time, only we are never near her." Lucas ate his piece in silence, his eyes downcast. Ethan wanted to object, but found no words. He, too, felt that family was no longer Laura's top priority. Dinner passed in tense silence. The only sounds were the rustling of the pizza box and the occasional sigh, as everyone was lost in their own thoughts. After the pizza, the kids went to their rooms to do their homework. Ethan cleaned up the leftovers, washed the dishes, and walked around the quiet house, checking that everyone was busy. He wanted to support the kids somehow, but he was afraid to touch on a painful topic once again. Later, around 10 o'clock, he looked in on Lucas. The boy was already asleep, curled up under the covers. Ethan adjusted the blanket on his son and quietly left. The light was on in Sophia's room. He knocked. "What?" The daughter responded after a while. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. A second later, the door opened slightly. Sophia looked out. She had a phone in her hands, music playing quietly in the background. "I wanted to say good night," Ethan smiled. "Oh, well, good night," she shrugged, getting ready to close the door. "Sophia," Ethan called out quietly before she slammed the door shut. "I know it's hard for you, and Lucas is worried, but Mom still loves you." Sophia looked straight at her father, her eyes glistening with tears, although her voice remained firm. "You know, Dad, love is actions. She is never with us. Is that love?" Ethan was at a loss. He wanted to object, to say that everything would be fine, but he knew that empty promises would only irritate his daughter. He sighed heavily. "Mom is trying. She's just going through a difficult time right now." The daughter snorted quietly. "Mom has been going through a difficult period for 2 years now, I think." Ethan lowered his head. "Give her a chance, Sophia. Please." For a moment, Sophia softened. "I know you're trying to protect us, Dad, but it hurts to watch you." She bit her lip, not finishing her sentence, and just shook her head. "Okay, let's go to bed." She closed the door, leaving Ethan in the hallway with a lump in his throat. He felt helpless. His daughter had seen more than he thought, and apparently understood how much he was suffering. Around 11 o'clock, Ethan came downstairs, dressed in his house clothes. Laura was still gone. He settled down in the living room, trying to read a book, but the letters blurred before his eyes. Sophia's words were spinning in his head. "It hurts to watch you." What was he doing? Enduring? Suffering? She probably didn't finish the sentence, but that's what she meant. The clock struck 11:30 as the front door creaked softly. It was pitch black outside, and a light rain was splattering the roof. Ethan looked up from his book. Laura entered, trying to make no noise, and was startled to see her husband on the couch. "Are you awake?" she asked quietly from the doorway. Ethan put the book down. "I was waiting for you. How was dinner?" Laura nodded, taking off her shoes. "It's fine. The client was happy, so we signed the contract." She moved toward the stairs, clearly intending to get away from the conversation as quickly as possible. Ethan stood up slowly and followed, turning off the light behind him. "The children were worried. Sophia and Lucas were waiting for you at the fair, and then they hoped that you would at least see them in the evening." "I told you I was busy," Laura said wearily, without turning around. She went up to the bedroom and threw her jacket on a chair. "I had no choice. The client is from Japan. They have their only day in town." Ethan stood in the bedroom doorway, watching his wife take off her jewelry in front of the mirror. In the past, at moments like this, he would have walked up to her, hugged her from behind, helped her take off the chain, and asked her more about the evening. But now there was an invisible wall between them. "I understand," he said quietly. "The kids are just bored." Laura met his gaze in the mirror. Irritation flashed in her eyes. "I'm tired, Ethan. Let's not discuss this now." He cringed internally at her tone and nodded. Laura turned away and went into the bathroom, closing the door. A minute later, Ethan heard the sound of running water. He sat down on the edge of the bed, ran his hand over his face. He noticed Laura's phone on the nightstand, the screen flickering with an incoming message. Ethan glanced involuntarily. The name of Laura's colleague appeared, Mark Office, and a short text. "Thank you for tonight. You are amazing as always. See you tomorrow." Ethan froze. As he watched, the screen went black. The sound of water continued in the bathroom. Laura probably didn't hear the signal. Ethan felt his fingers grow cold. He didn't know Mark well, but he knew he was one of the firm's managers, someone who worked with Laura often. His thoughts raced. Maybe Mark had been to dinner with a client too. That would explain the message. But the tone seemed too personal. He stood up, feeling like a trespasser, even though he had done nothing. His own heart was pounding. He realized that he was peeping into someone else's correspondence, but it was his wife's phone. However, he did not dare read further. Laura emerged from the bathroom a few minutes later, wearing a robe and drying her hair with a towel. Ethan was already lying on his side of the bed, turning off the bedside lamp, feigning sleep. He heard her pick up her phone, presumably to read the text message. There was a moment of silence in the room. Then Laura quietly typed a response or simply put the phone away and turned over on her side. Ethan lay with his eyes closed, but sleep would not come. A dull, anxious thump was growing in his chest. Slowly, breathing evenly so that Laura would think he was asleep, Ethan turned over possible explanations in his head. None of them reassured him. Finally, around 1 o'clock in the morning, he fell into a restless sleep, still without answers to his tormenting questions. The next morning was the usual bustle, getting the kids ready for school, briefly exchanging words with Laura as they ran. Laura was the first to leave again, driving away in her car long before the kids had even put their backpacks on. Ethan drove Sophia and Lucas to their schools and returned home. The drawing he had been working on was waiting for him, but he couldn't concentrate. His thoughts kept returning to the message on his wife's phone that night. Ethan couldn't get the phrase, "You're amazing," as always, out of his head. It sounded ambiguous and alarming, but he didn't know how to talk to Laura about it. He had no direct evidence of anything, and accusations out of thin air could only make the situation worse. Trying to push away the bad thoughts, Ethan bent over the drawing of an extension to a private house ordered by friends. Suddenly, his phone rang. The name of an old friend appeared on the screen, David. "Hey, buddy." David's voice sounded cheerful when Ethan answered. "Where'd you go, huh? All that family stuff?" Ethan smiled into the phone, trying to sound friendly. "Hi, David. Yes, sometimes school, sometimes home. I worked for myself a little." "I see. Listen, I'm actually calling for a reason. We have a major project coming up at our company, a municipal competition for the design of a new city park with a pavilion. And you immediately came to mind. Remember how great you did the concept of an eco-friendly building back then? You would fit in perfectly with the team." Ethan's heart sank. A city park project. That would be interesting. The old architect's excitement stirred in the corners of his mind. He involuntarily squeezed his pencil. "Sounds great, David. But I haven't taken anything big in a long time. And will I have the time? Well, the deadlines are tight, yes. You'll have to work hard for 3 months practically without days off. But the budget is huge, and it's useful to be seen in front of the mayor's office. You'd get excellent recommendations." Ethan closed his eyes. 3 months of plowing. Given the current family realities, it seemed unthinkable. Who would take the children, take care of the house? Laura was always busy. Her schedule was full. None of her relatives were around. He felt bitter regret rising inside. "It's tempting, but I don't even know, Dave. I really want to, but I have a family dependent on me." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then my friend sighed. "I understand. It's a shame, of course. You're really cool at this, Ethan. You could have had your own office a long time ago." Ethan grinned wryly at the plans for an addition to the house spread across the table, a job far less ambitious than a city park. "Another time, I hope," he said, trying to sound cheerful. "When the children are older or the situation changes." "Sure, sure," David said quickly, but there was disappointment in his tone. "Okay, buddy, I'll be running. It was good to hear from you. And if you change your mind, call me, we'll grab you." After hanging up, Ethan sat for a few minutes, staring at the phone. A sense of missed opportunity tugged at his ribs. David was right. He had once been a promising man. His professors at university had predicted a brilliant career for him. He had started working at a prestigious firm straight out of graduate school. He had won a couple of local design competitions before he was 30. And now, Ethan stood and walked over to a bookcase along the wall of his office. On the top shelf, trophies were gathering dust. A glass trophy from the Oregon Young Architects Competition, a certificate for best private home design. He ran his finger along the rim of the trophy, removing a layer of dust. A conversation with Laura many years ago, when Lucas was a toddler, came to mind. Then he was offered a job as a lead architect at a major Seattle construction firm. A dream job, but it required relocation and even more time on the job. He remembered that evening. Little Lucas was acting up with a fever. Sophia, a first grader, was asking for help with a craft for school, and Laura had just returned from a business trip, exhausted but happy she had been promoted to marketing manager. They were sitting in the kitchen, and Ethan gently brought up the job opening in Seattle. Laura listened, rubbing her temples. "Move to Seattle?" she asked wearily. "Ethan, but I have a job here, and you'll be gone all day. What about the kids? Sophia's just starting school. Mom's not around. We need to find a new nanny. We've just gotten our lives in order." Ethan felt selfish then. He looked at his wife's tired face, at his son snoring in his arms. "You're probably right," he said quietly. "That would be too drastic a step." Laura nodded and smiled with relief. "Of course. I'm sure you'll have more opportunities closer to home. And now the most important thing is stability for the children. You can take on projects remotely and you'll find your own clients. Your talent won't go anywhere." She kissed him, thanking him for his understanding. Ethan had thought it was right then, too. He hadn't slept that night, digesting the decision, but by morning he had firmly decided to give up the job for his family. And indeed, he established a small flow of orders in Portland, spent more time with the children, allowed Laura to devote herself entirely to her career. He was proud that he supported his wife, that the children grew up with their father nearby. But now, looking at the dusty trophies, Ethan wondered, did anyone appreciate his sacrifices? Did it make the children happy? Did it make Laura happy? He felt bitterness rising in his chest. The family was still falling apart, despite all their efforts. Ethan returned to the table and glanced at the drawing through a haze of still-dried tears. He had to take a deep breath to fight the emptiness that had washed over him. Then he went back to work, carefully drawing the wall of the extension, drawing lines. The work was calming, allowing him to briefly distract himself from the pain and doubt. But the thought that life could have turned out differently if he had done something different back then was still there, and it burned inside. Several days passed in a tense balance. Laura seemed unaware of the change in her husband's mood. She still left early, returned late, and was absent-minded in the rare moments at home. Ethan tried to act as usual, but inside he was burning with anxiety and suspicion. One evening, when Laura was working late again, Ethan put the kids to bed and went down to the kitchen for tea. He noticed Laura's laptop on the table. She had left it there that morning. The laptop was open, and the screen was glowing. Ethan automatically went to close the lid to keep the battery from dying, but his gaze caught on the messenger window open on the screen. There was an open chat. At first, Ethan didn't pay attention. Laura often texted her colleagues, but his gaze caught the name of the person he was talking to, Mark. His heart immediately began to pound. He sank into a chair in front of his laptop, casting a quick glance at the stairs. The children were asleep. The house was quiet. His palms were sweaty as he reluctantly looked down at the latest messages. "Mark, I can't stop thinking about you after yesterday. When will we see each other alone again?" Ethan felt his breath catch. He looked up the thread, frantically scrolling the mouse wheel. The lines of text swam before his eyes, but the meaning was clear. "Here's a message from Laura. A client meeting is running late. I'll be late." This is probably what she wrote to Ethan last night, and immediately after that, the same message forwarded to Mark. Texted him that I'll be late. Now I'm free for you. Ethan swallowed hard as he continued reading. Mark replied, "Excellent. I'm already waiting at our place. I could hardly wait for this evening." Then came a series of messages with obvious hints of intimacy, about how good they were together, how Mark hugs her after. Ethan couldn't finish reading. Everything swam before his eyes. His Laura wrote words of passion to another man, thanking him for the night. Ethan's hands shook on the keyboard. He jerked away from the laptop as if he'd been burned. His heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to jump out of his chest. He covered his mouth with his hand, afraid that a groan or a scream would escape his lips. One thought was pulsing in his head. It was true. Not just a vague suspicion, but a reality recorded in black and white on the screen. Laura was cheating on him. For some time now, judging by the context of the correspondence, past meetings were mentioned, plans for the future. Ethan closed his eyes. Perhaps he hoped to wake up from this nightmare to return to his old life, where his wife was a faithful partner, where his family was a fortress. But when he looked at the screen again, the lines were still there. The treacherous words were etched into his memory. He scrolled up carefully, trying to figure out how long ago it all started. There were dates in the correspondence from a week ago, a month ago. So the affair had lasted more than one day. Laura had lied to him over and over again on those very evenings when she was working with clients or staying late at the office. Ethan felt physically ill. He was sick with worry and pain. He jumped up, gasping, and threw open the kitchen window, letting in the cool night air. It was dark and quiet outside. He took a deep breath, trying to fight off the rising panic. The first sharp flash of pain gave way to numbness. Never in his life had he felt so weak. What to do now? Confront Laura immediately, but she was not home. She was at work again, or most likely with him, with Mark. The thought made Ethan slam his fist on the windowsill. The pain in his arm sobered him up a bit. He realized he couldn't think straight right now. His emotions were threatening to overwhelm him, to make him do something stupid. He closed the laptop, although he no longer cared if Laura found out, judging by the fact that the window was open. Perhaps she hadn't been hiding it or simply forgotten to close it. But that didn't matter now. Ethan began to pace the kitchen, trying to calm down. Bits of the text messages were burned into his retina. "I can't stop thinking about you. In our place, how good we had it." He felt anger, pain, and humiliation. He remembered the evening when he was waiting for her to come back from dinner with a client. It turns out she was with Mark then, and he was sitting at home, putting their children to bed, making up excuses for her absence. The thought of the children struck especially sharply. Sophia and Lucas. What would happen to them if the family fell apart completely? Dimly, through the shock, Ethan realized that he had to keep quiet for them, at least until he decided what to do next. He forced himself to sit up and take a few sips of cold water. Gradually, the noise of blood in his ears died down. The decision did not mature right away, but it began to emerge little by little. First, he needed to see everything with his own eyes. He needed to remove the last grain of doubt, although there was almost none left. A piece of his soul was still clinging to hope. Maybe this was some kind of mistake. What if what he saw was just flirting over text, and in reality it didn't go far? Laura couldn't have betrayed them like that. But the text said otherwise. He himself couldn't understand why he was looking for this crumb of hope. Ethan decided he had to talk to Laura, but not now, when he was barely holding back. He needed proof that couldn't be denied or twisted. His word against her lies that wasn't enough. But if he saw it for himself, then everything would be clear. That night he barely slept, replaying the coming evening in his head. In his imagination, scenes of a scandalous confrontation in front of everyone. Then cold indifference from Laura replaced each other. He was both afraid and needed to go there. A little more and the secret would be revealed, no matter what truth was revealed to those around him. Ethan did not want to humiliate himself with a scandal, but he could not continue to live a lie. This was his chance to regain his respect and freedom. At night, towards morning, Laura sent only a message when the sky outside the window was already turning pale. "There was a lot of work last night. I stayed at Kate's. See you in the morning." Kate is a colleague from the department, a friend of Laura's. Another lie. Ethan stared at the message on his phone and felt the last of his trust in his wife crumble. He didn't answer. He just stood up like a robot and went to make breakfast for the kids, trying to hide the bitterness that was creeping into his eyes. A new day lay ahead, perhaps the hardest of his life. A couple of days later, there was a chance to confirm the suspicions once and for all. On Friday evening, Laura announced that they had a rush job in the office before the presentation, and she would have to stay late. She asked not to wait and to have dinner without her. Ethan, maintaining an outward calm, only nodded, although inside everything was clenched with anticipation. He already knew. Most likely, there was no rush job. After dinner, having put Lucas to bed with a book and making sure that Sophia was busy in her room, Ethan quietly left the house. He told the children that he would be leaving for a while to run some errands. His heart was pounding. He knew that he was taking a desperate step. Ethan pulled up to the office building where Laura worked and parked across the street. In the twilight, the parking lot in front of the office was half empty. If there was a rush at the company, there were few people there. Minute after minute, Ethan sat behind the wheel, peering into the office doors. His heart was pounding somewhere in his throat. Every time someone came out, he tensed up, but they were unfamiliar employees. Dark thoughts swarmed in his head. What if he was wrong? Or, on the contrary, was about to see the worst thing with his own eyes? His hands were sweating on the steering wheel, and he wiped them on his pants several times. The tension became almost unbearable, but Ethan forced himself to endure and wait. After about half an hour of waiting, he saw Laura emerge from the front door. She wasn't alone. Mark was walking alongside her. Even from a distance, Ethan recognized him by his tall frame and blonde hair. Laura laughed at something as she looked at her colleague, and she lightly touched his arm as they stopped at his car. Ethan hunched over in his car seat, watching from the shadows. They exchanged a few words, and Mark opened the passenger door of his car for Laura. Instead of getting in, Laura turned to face Mark. In the dim light of the streetlight, Mark could see his hands on her waist. Laura didn't flinch. Instead, she bowed her head and, to Ethan's eye, smiled. The next few seconds seemed to pass in slow motion. Mark leaned down and kissed Laura. Not briefly, not in a friendly way, but their lips met in the kind of tender, passionate kiss Ethan hadn't received from his wife in so long. Laura wrapped her arms around Mark's neck, returning the feeling. Even at such a distance, everything was clear. There was no rush job. Laura was simply using work as an excuse to spend the evening with her lover. When he looked back, Laura was already getting into Mark's car. The headlights came on, and the car pulled out of the parking lot. Ethan ducked instinctively, though they were unlikely to notice him in the darkness. The car disappeared around the corner, carrying his wife further and further away from their home from him. Ethan sat motionless for a few more minutes. His chest heaved, his breathing ragged. He had just seen with his own eyes something he did not want to believe. The pain of what he had seen came back with renewed force. Now there was no doubt at all. His hands were shaking so much that it was hard to drive, but somehow he got going. He drove mechanically, not feeling the road beneath his wheels. Instead, the scene in the parking lot kept appearing before his eyes, Laura in the arms of another man. On the way home, Ethan stopped on a quiet side street. He needed to compose himself before heading back to his kids. He turned off the engine and dropped his head onto the steering wheel. There was a hollowness in his chest, and then a soft, heart-rending sob. Ethan was crying for the first time in years, a silent scream of pain, frustration, and anger all at once. He didn't know how much time passed. Finally, the sobbing subsided, leaving him empty. Ethan wiped his wet face with the back of his hand and looked into the mirror. Red eyes and the face of a man in shock stared back at him. But there was something else in the reflection, too: determination. Ethan knew this couldn't go on. He couldn't pretend that nothing had happened. But he couldn't rush into an investigation right now. Either the kids were home, it was night, and he was broken. He had to think everything through. He took a few deep breaths, trying to calm the last of his shaking. Then he started the engine again and headed home. When Ethan quietly entered the house, it was half dark. Sophia had left a nightlight in the living room for Lucas, dimly illuminating the hallway. His daughter had apparently already gone to bed, exhausted from the school week. Ethan cautiously peered into the children's rooms. Lucas was fast asleep, sprawled out on his back and snoring softly. Sophia's phone screen glowed under the blanket. She was still awake, but when he appeared, she pretended to be asleep, probably having heard him come in. Ethan said nothing. He closed the nursery doors and went downstairs. Laura was gone, apparently planning to return late at night or early in the morning, as she had done earlier in the week. Ethan couldn't sleep. He sank down on the living room couch, staring at the wall. His thoughts raced until they came to a clear decision. He wouldn't let her deceive him and the children any longer. But starting a scandal out of emotion was too easy and wouldn't bring the desired result. No, he had to wait for the right moment. He remembered that Laura's company was planning a corporate party in a week to celebrate the success of the campaign. They had sent an invitation to the couple. Laura had mentioned in passing that the partners might come, although without enthusiasm. Apparently she didn't really want him there. Now Ethan understood why. Mark would be there, as would everyone who might suspect or know about their affair. Laura was uncomfortable showing up with her husband. That was the thought that caught Ethan's tired mind. A corporate party, a public place, lots of people Laura knew. If he came, she'd have to keep up appearances. Maybe he'd see something else there, or even hear the truth from her lips, if not directly, then in conversation. He was already sure that many people in the office knew or suspected of their affair. They'd been acting too freely today. The decision became stronger. He would go this evening, and afterwards, there would be a conversation that could not be avoided. As Ethan finally made his way upstairs to the empty marital bedroom, he felt the broken man being replaced by another man, one who had been pushed to his limits. Calm, patient Ethan Crow had made a firm decision. The truth had to come out, and then come what may. The next few days were unsettlingly quiet. Laura returned on Saturday morning, just as the kids were awake. Ethan met her in the kitchen, silently handing her a mug of coffee, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. But inside, he was seething. It was all he could do not to blurt it out right then and there. But for the kids, he put on a mask of calm. Laura looked tired but happy. She thanked him for the coffee. "Thank you. How is it here? Was everything okay?" Ethan shrugged. "Yes, we managed. The children are fine." At that moment, Lucas ran into the kitchen. "Mom!" he exclaimed joyfully, although there was a note of reproach in his voice. "You didn't come yesterday. Dad and I were watching a movie. We thought you'd join us." Laura was confused for a second. "Sorry, baby. I had work. We'll make it up to you later, I promise." She patted her son on the head, and he, seemingly satisfied with at least her presence, ran off to play. Sophia, however, demonstratively did not come out to greet her mother. From her room, she simply turned on loud music. Laura glanced at the ceiling, behind which was her daughter's bedroom, and sighed quietly. "Sophia, I see you're offended at me again." "What do you think?" Ethan couldn't resist a taunt. "You're hardly ever home." She feels abandoned. Laura frowned, not used to her husband's tone. "I'm not having fun, I'm working, Ethan. Someone has to provide for the family." He clenched his teeth, holding back an angry, "Really? And do you also provide for your family with your nights with Mark?" Instead, he answered evenly, "It's a question of priorities." Laura wanted to say something, but she remained silent. She seemed to notice a change in his behavior, a colder tone, a dryness instead of his usual gentleness. So the weekend passed. Ethan kept to himself, went for a walk with the kids without Laura, and when he returned, he saw her with her laptop, working or pretending to, avoiding conversation. On the eve of the corporate evening, Laura, getting ready for the office in the morning, reluctantly dropped. "You remember, tomorrow we have a party in the company. I told you. You don't have to go if you don't want to. There will be a lot of people. You won't know anyone. It'll be boring." Ethan, pouring himself some coffee, replied almost cheerfully, "What are you saying? Of course I'll go. I want to finally see where you work day and night and meet your colleagues." Laura froze for a moment, then chuckled nervously. "Well, as you wish. I just thought you weren't interested. Okay, come to the Grand Hotel at 7. It starts at 7:30. "I'll be on time," he said firmly. He didn't miss the shadow of worry that flashed in his wife's eyes. Laura clearly hadn't expected his consent and was now racking her brains over why her husband had suddenly decided to show up at her corporate party. Left alone after she left, Ethan exhaled slowly. His heart was beating faster in anticipation of the outcome. He didn't know what exactly would happen at the party, but he felt that all the I's would be dotted there. He had barely slept the night before, running through different scenarios in his head. He imagined how he would finally confront Laura with everything he had learned and see her reaction. Laura could get angry or, on the contrary, beg for forgiveness, but no matter what happened, their life would never be the same after the corporate party. Ethan dozed off toward morning, determined to end this painful period of lies. On the appointed day, after sending the children to a neighbor's house, he asked Mrs. Rogers from the house across the street to watch Lucas and Sophia for a couple of hours. Ethan took his best suit out of the closet, the same one he used to wear to formal receptions, back when their marriage was strong and he was invited to events from Laura's work. The suit was a little sagging. Ethan had lost weight from stress in recent months, but it still fit well. He shaved carefully, tidied himself up. Looking in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. A tense face, a hard line around his mouth, determination in his eyes. Everything will change today, he thought as he left the house. Fear, pain, and a strange relief were mixed together. The uncertainty would end. He would finally stop living a lie. No matter how painful it would never get any worse than it was now. Ethan arrived at the hotel early and parked. In the luxurious hall on the second floor, Laura's company employees and their companions were gathering. Light music was playing, waiters were passing around glasses of champagne. Ethan, feeling like a stranger at this celebration of life, nevertheless gathered his will into a fist and crossed the threshold of the hall. Inside, he was ready for anything. Ethan kept to himself, trying not to look lost. It took Laura a moment to notice him. He saw her surrounded by several colleagues at the drinks counter. A look of surprise and tension crossed his wife's face as their eyes met. Pasting on a smile, she led him to her company, which had recently hired a lot of new people. "Oh, colleagues, meet my husband, Ethan," she said evenly. "Ethan, this is Julia from sales, Rob is our CFO, and this is..." She hesitated for a split second, imagining the tall man next to her, that same Mark. "Mark," he finished calmly and extended his hand to Ethan. "It's very nice to finally get to know each other better." Ethan squeezed his hand, looking straight into the eyes of his wife's lover. Mark was casual, but his gaze was searching. Laura quickly interjected. "Mark is my colleague. We are running a luxury line project together." "A colleague, yes," Ethan repeated quietly, not taking his eyes off the man. His temples were pounding with tension, but he maintained an outward calm. Mark smiled slightly. "We've heard a lot about you, Ethan. Laura said you were an architect." "Once upon a time," Ethan nodded. "Now I'm more occupied with the house." He said it on purpose, watching the reaction. Mark exchanged a glance with Laura, and she smiled tightly. "Ethan now works freelance to have a flexible schedule. It helps a lot with the kids." Julia from the sales department, a pretty woman in her 30s, cheerfully remarked, "Well, wow, how great. Usually wives sit at home with the children, and here is a husband. A modern family." Ethan heard the kindness in her voice, but he thought he saw the corners of Mark's lips twitch in a smile. Laura tensed slightly, too. "Yes, Ethan is very supportive of me," she said almost sharply, and then changed the subject, turning to her colleagues. "Let's go get some champagne. I think they've got trays there." She skillfully steered the conversation away. Ethan found himself slightly behind the group, as if he had been forgotten. It suited him. He stood a little back, watching. For an hour, he watched as Laura tried not to look in his direction. She talked to different people, and Ethan felt like a ghost at someone else's party. Several times, colleagues approached him, asked him politely about his activities, and each time the mention that he was not currently working in the office caused a forced smile from his interlocutors. Ethan didn't care what anyone thought for him. The children were the most important thing. After a while, he noticed that Laura and Mark had disappeared from his field of vision. Ethan glanced around the room and went out into the hallway. His heart sank. Against the opposite wall, in the shadows, he saw his wife and her colleague together. They were talking quietly, their heads close together. Ethan hid behind a column, close enough to hear their voices. He's kind of nervous, Mark whispered. Are you sure he doesn't know anything? I don't know, Laura answered quietly, irritation evident in her voice. He's been acting strange the last few days, but he probably thinks I'm just stressed at work. Why did you come? You said he wasn't interested. Mark chuckled. He looks like a poor relative, funny. Ethan felt a chill run through his gut at the words, but he continued to listen, holding his breath. Laura sighed wearily. Don't say that. It's just, he's out of touch with life. A stay-at-home dad. I haven't gone anywhere with him in a long time, so he decided, apparently, to keep me company. He probably feels that I'm slipping away. She chuckled. Mark snorted quietly. Slipping away is putting it mildly. You haven't been with him for a long time, Laura. Everyone can see that. Yeah, she smiled bitterly. The whole office seems to know about my housewife husband. Do you think they don't whisper behind my back? They think he's not worthy of me. Ethan, come on, who's interested in him anyway, except for you? Or rather, except for the kids, Mark chuckled. Laura laughed quietly. You're probably right. He's a good father, but he hasn't shown himself as a man for a long time. It's boring with him, you know. No ambition, no passion. I held on for the sake of the family, but to tell the truth, we've been neighbors for a long time, not spouses. Like if you believe that passion is not the only thing that holds a relationship together, and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next exciting stories. These words cut Ethan to the quick. Every phrase of his wife was like a stab in the back. He could barely contain his trembling. His heart was painfully squeezed. Nausea rose in his throat. Well, you've made your choice, Mark said softly and touched her shoulder. You know I want to be with you. Laura turned to him and said in a barely audible voice, Me too. But I need time. Everything is complicated. Children. She didn't have time to finish. Ethan, unable to listen any longer, stepped out from behind the column. Laura and Mark jumped away from each other, startled by the unexpected appearance. Ethan looked straight at his wife. He felt the icy calm that hid the storm. Sorry to interrupt, he said quietly, and Laura immediately realized that he had heard enough. Ethan, you. She began automatically, but stopped when she met his gaze. Fear flashed in her eyes. Mark clenched his jaw but remained silent, assessing the situation. Ethan looked down for a second, gathering his strength, then looked back at his wife. You're right, Laura. This can't go on. She took a step towards him. Let's talk at home. This is not the place. But Ethan had already turned away. Before leaving, he glanced briefly at Mark. Thank you for finally dispelling all my doubts. Without waiting for an answer, he quickly walked away down the corridor. Behind him, he heard Laura catching up with him. Ethan, stop. He didn't stop. As he left the hall, he felt the fresh air of the night. Laura ran after him onto the hotel porch, grabbing him by the sleeve. Wait, this is all wrong. Ethan paused, looking down at her. He suddenly felt a kind of detached wonder at this beautiful but lying woman. Had he really loved her for so many years? Not so, he echoed hoarsely. I heard it with my own ears. Neighbors, not spouses. The husband is a house husband. Should I continue? Laura turned pale. I was angry. I was just talking nonsense. Nonsense. Ethan smiled bitterly. Cheating is not nonsense, Laura. The fact that you don't value me is not nonsense. It's a fact. She looked around, making sure no one could hear them from the porch. Let's go home and discuss everything calmly, please. But there was no remorse in the voice, only panic. Ethan quietly, clearly enunciated. There's nothing to discuss. I'm filing for divorce, that's what you wanted. Laura's mouth opened, but no words came out. Ethan removed her hand from his sleeve, turned, and walked toward the parking lot, leaving his wife standing alone in the cold. Inside, he felt a terrible emptiness, but at the same time, a strange sense of liberation. The point of no return had been passed. Now he had to begin to destroy the remains of what had once been their family, in order to then try to build something new for himself and the children. Ethan felt his heart pounding with adrenaline the entire drive home. Laura's words echoed in his ears. The shock had been replaced by a steely determination that he would not be walked all over again. Late in the evening, when the children were long asleep, Laura arrived home. Ethan was waiting for her in the living room, sitting in the dark. As soon as the door quietly opened, he turned on the table lamp. Laura jumped in surprise. "We need to talk," Ethan began without emotion. Laura closed the door, hesitating to answer. She looked confused. Her eyes were red either from tears or from nerves. "I know," she said quietly. "Ethan, I'm so sorry." He smiled bitterly. "About what exactly? About cheating on me? Or about what I overheard?" Laura closed her eyes for a moment. "About everything. I made mistakes." Ethan stood up, not taking his eyes off her. "Mistakes? It went on for months, Laura. A conscious choice, not a mistake. You would have kept lying to my face if I hadn't caught you." Laura clasped her hands nervously. "It all went too far. But that doesn't mean I wanted to destroy the family." "Really?" Ethan raised his voice, then glanced up at the children, forcing himself to speak more quietly. "You've been making fun of me behind my back, openly dating your lover. How long has this been going on? A year? More?" "A few months," she answered tightly. "I'm not making excuses. It just happened that way." Ethan felt a flash of anger. "You're not looking for excuses. You haven't even apologized properly just now." "I'm sorry, that's all." Laura sobbed. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm so sorry. I was confused. I didn't plan it, I swear. I just felt lonely, misunderstood." "Lonely?" He shook his head, stunned. "Laura, you distanced yourself. I tried to support you all my life. I took everything upon myself at home. How could you say that I am not worthy of you, that I am boring?" She covered her face with her hands. "I was angry. I didn't think you would hear." Ethan laughed bitterly under his breath. "So the problem is what I heard, not that you think so." Laura dropped her hands, and her face showed stubbornness. "Okay, if you want the truth. Yes, I think so. You, you faded away, Ethan. You used to have ambitions, plans, and then you turned into just a family man. I admire your talent, your passion for work, and you gave it up. You were happy with everything sitting quietly at home while I made a career. But that's not enough for me." Ethan listened, struck by how alien and cold her words sounded. He nodded slowly. "I understand. You didn't need a partner, but a competitor, an equal player. And I turned out to be a home daddy, as you put it." Laura winced. "Mark, he's different. He's on my level. We're developing together in our work." "And have sex," Ethan added sharply. "That's enough. I get it." He walked past her into the hallway, took a thick envelope out of the locker drawer, and returned, handing it to her. Laura frowned as she opened the envelope. There were papers inside. "What is this?" she asked tensely. "A draft of the divorce agreement," Ethan answered evenly. "I had a lawyer prepare it. It's simple. We're divorcing by mutual consent. I keep the house I bought it with my savings before we got married, as you remember. I keep custody of the kids, and you get free access for visits by agreement. Financially, we each keep our own. We both have income." Laura leafed through the papers in shock. "Have you already visited a lawyer? Why drag it out? I've known about you for a week already." Ethan froze, crossing his arms. "After yesterday, everything is clear." Laura turned pale. "You decided everything for me then?" A cold note crept into her voice. "What is there to decide?" He answered defiantly. "You said it yourself. We haven't been married for a long time. We just pretended. So we won't pretend anymore." "And the children?" she whispered. "The children will stay with me. You love them, I know. But there is no room for them in your schedule. You have proven that. Plus, I'm sorry, I don't want Mark to lay a finger on my children." Laura clenched the papers, her lips trembling. "Mark wasn't going to. He's not into children at all." She stopped short, realizing that she was saying too much. Ethan chuckled. "So the new daddy doesn't threaten them. Well, that's good." Laura closed the folder with documents. "It's all so fast. I'm not sure." "What?" Ethan narrowed his eyes. You're not sure you want a divorce? Laura downed the whiskey. I, I don't know. I didn't think it would all come out like this. I thought I could handle my feelings on my own. Ethan shook his head. It's too late. You had a choice many times. You made yours. What if I said I was ready to end things with him? She blurted out suddenly. For the sake of the family, we could try. For the sake of the children, at least. Ethan felt a faint echo of hope. Was there still any? But then he remembered her poisonous laughter with Mark, the contempt in her voice. He shook his head. No, Laura, I don't believe you anymore. Never. Please, her eyes filled with tears. The kids will hate me. Sophia already. Sophia already understands, Ethan answered wearily. She heard us arguing yesterday, I think. I'll have to explain to her and Lucas in the morning that we're getting a divorce. Laura covered her mouth with her hand, trying to hold back her sobs. This is a nightmare. I destroyed everything myself. Ethan felt no pity for her tears. His own wound was too deep. He only said, yes, it destroyed it. They were silent for a while. Laura's tears were slowly streaming down her cheeks, and for the first time in the entire conversation, she looked truly lost. What will happen next? She asked dully. I've already made an appointment with a mediator for next week, Ethan replied in a businesslike tone. We'll discuss the details of custody. You can bring your own lawyer if you want. But Laura, if you decide to fight for sole custody, I'll tell the court the reason for the divorce, and you'll have big problems at work too. Your relationship with your coworker clearly violates company policy, especially since I have photo evidence. Laura flushed. You wouldn't do that. He looked at her coldly. Don't test me. I've had enough nobility all these years. Now I think about the well-being of the children and about myself too. Laura slumped her shoulders. No, I won't argue. You're right. You've always been better than me, she whispered. Ethan didn't answer. He took the documents from her hands. I'll leave you a copy. Sign it when you're ready. With these words, he left the room, ending the conversation. Laura was left standing in the living room, hugging herself, as if all the warmth had suddenly left her. Ethan went up to his room and quietly peered into the children's room. Sophia was lying with her eyes closed, but he could tell from her tense face that she was not sleeping. Lucas was snoring, not hearing anything. Ethan entered his daughter's room, closed the door behind him, and called in a whisper. Sophia, you're not sleeping, I know. The girl opened her eyes. In the moonlight, he saw wet tracks on her cheeks. Are you getting a divorce? She asked, barely audible through her lips. Ethan felt a prick in his heart. He walked over, sat on the edge of the bed, and nodded. Yes, we are very sorry. Sophia clenched her fists. It's because Mom. She didn't finish, but Ethan understood. He stroked her hair. It's complicated between us. But you should know one thing. We both love you and Lucas. We just can't be together anymore. Sophia trembled. I hate her for what she did to us. Don't say that. She's still your mother, Ethan gently reproached, although in his soul he himself felt similarly. Sophia brushed away her tears. It's your fault too, Dad. Ethan was taken aback. You're too kind. You always forgive everything. That's why she sat on my neck. The daughter blurted out with teenage directness. Ethan smiled sadly. Maybe, but that's in the past. Now I'll try to be strong. For you and Lucas. Sophia sat up, hugging her father suddenly very tightly. Ethan pressed her to himself, stroking her back. Everything will be okay, he whispered to her. I promise. Sophia just nodded, burying her nose in his shoulder. That night, Ethan slept fitfully. Laura locked herself in the guest room. The house sank into a heavy silence, as if mourning a broken family. But the worst was yet to come, explaining the situation to Lucas and building a new life from the ruins of the old. The morning was hard. Laura looked exhausted and barely left her room. But Ethan knew that he couldn't put off talking to the kids. He asked Sophia and Lucas to come down to the kitchen after breakfast. The children were wary. They usually didn't have such family gatherings. Laura sat pale and red-eyed. Ethan clutching his cold coffee tightly. When the children had settled down at the table, Ethan began, trying to speak calmly. Sophia, Lucas, your mother and I need to tell you something. Lucas immediately tensed up. Sophia looked down. She already knew. We have decided to separate, Ethan continued, choosing his words carefully. We will no longer live together as husband and wife. There was silence for a few seconds. Ethan heard a woodpecker tapping on a tree outside the window, and for some reason the sound seemed deafening. Lucas blinked, not fully understanding. What do you mean? Break up? Are you getting divorced? Laura let out a soft sob. Ethan nodded. Yes, son, we're getting divorced. Lucas looked from his father to his mother in shock. No, no, you can't. Why? Tears were already shining in his eyes. Ethan felt his heart tighten. He reached out his hand, but his son pushed his chair back, standing up. Lucas, Laura began guiltily, sometimes that happens between adults. You don't love us anymore? The boy cried out, looking straight at his mother. It's because of you, right? You're always somewhere else, never with us. Lucas, Laura snapped, her voice breaking. But the boy got excited. You're the one ruining everything, he shouted and rushed out of the kitchen, slamming the door into the backyard. Laura burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. Ethan jumped up to go after his son, but Sophia touched his elbow. I'll do it myself, she said quietly and ran out after her brother. Ethan was left alone with Laura, whose sons were getting louder. He understood her pain. Lucas was his mother's favorite, and now he blamed her. I can't stand it if he hates me, Laura squeezed out through her tears. Ethan closed his eyes tiredly. You should have thought about it earlier. He needs a break. He's still little, he doesn't understand. Give him time. What have I done? She moaned. My boy. Ethan was at a loss for words. After a while, the children came in from the street. Lucas was wiping his tear-stained face with his sleeve. Sophia was holding him by the shoulders. They entered silently. Lucas approached his father. Do you want this too? He asked in a trembling voice. Ethan squatted down in front of his son and looked him in the eyes. Mom and I decided this way because otherwise it will only get worse. But listen, it's not your fault, and we both still love you. Lucas buried his forehead in his dad's shoulder. Don't go, Dad. I'm not going anywhere, Ethan whispered hotly, hugging his son tightly. You're staying with me in this house, and Sophia too. The boy jerked away and looked at his mother. And Mom? Laura replied, sobbing. I will live somewhere else for a while, but I will visit you, I promise. Lucas shook his head. I don't want you to go, he screamed, and burst into tears again. Laura stood up, trying to come over, but he hid behind his father, clinging to Ethan. Sophia said quietly, Mom, it's better not to touch him for now. Laura stopped, her hands hanging limply at her sides. Ethan patted his son on the back. Quiet, quiet. Everything will be fine, Lucas. You will be able to see Mom whenever you want. We just won't live together now. But why? He sobbed. Can't you make peace? Ethan met Laura's gaze across the table. She shook her head, wiping away tears. No, baby, Ethan said softly to his son. We've tried, but we can't. It's hard to explain. Someday you'll understand. Lucas cried for a few more minutes until Ethan took him upstairs, rocking him to sleep as he had when he was a child. Sophia stayed downstairs with her mother. Before Ethan left, he heard his daughter say harshly, I hope he will forgive you someday, but I won't soon. To which Laura only began to sob louder. The next few days were a whirlwind. Laura packed her things and moved into a temporary apartment her company had provided her with service housing for a couple of months until she found her own. The divorce was relatively peaceful. Laura signed the papers without asking for anything more than what had been agreed upon. It seemed that she herself wanted to end the agony of uncertainty as soon as possible. A couple of days later, Laura came home to pack her things. While she silently packed clothes and books into cardboard boxes, Ethan kept the children busy in the yard to keep them from worrying too much. Laura went out onto the porch to get another box and stopped next to Ethan. "I'll only take what's mine," she said quietly. "Everything else is yours." Ethan nodded, not knowing what to say. At that moment, he saw deep sadness in her eyes. However, neither of them found the words. Laura only quietly said, "I'm sorry again," and turned away, hurrying to get to work. Ethan stood aside for a long time, watching as traces of Laura's presence gradually disappeared from the house, her shoes, her favorite vase, boxes of documents. With each box taken out, he felt as if something heavy but necessary was happening, a final farewell to her past life. By evening, Laura had loaded the last suitcase into the car. She came over to say goodbye to the children, hugging each one for a long time. Sophia stood there coldly, her lips pressed together. Lucas cried and begged her not to leave. Ethan had to gently lead his son back into the house, while Laura tore herself away from the children in tears. As she left, she cast another guilty glance across the threshold at Ethan. Ethan responded with a curt nod. The door closed, cutting them off from each other for real. At first, the children lived as if in a dream. Sophia withdrew, spending even more time in her room or outside the house, avoiding her mother on her rare visits. Lucas was sad at first. He asked every day when his mother would come back. Ethan had to gently explain each time that his mother was now living separately, but she loved him. Laura called her son every evening, and he spoke briefly, sparingly, still offended. A new life began for Ethan. Now he had to be both father and mother to the children. In the morning to get them ready for school, in the afternoon housework, in the evening to help with homework, cook dinner. Every morning began with slight chaos. Either Lucas could not find a textbook or Sophia spilled juice on the uniform before going out. It was difficult without extra hands, but over time they established their own special system and even learned to prepare clothes and backpacks in advance the night before. Sometimes he could barely hold on, falling back into his pillow at night, completely exhausted. There were hard days, of course. Sometimes Ethan lay awake at night, suddenly acutely aware of his loneliness. The house was different without Laura, quiet, as if empty. He knew that despite all the pain, part of him still mourned the lost dreams of a happy family. Even his children sometimes tested his strength. One late evening, Sophia did not return from her friends at the appointed time. The phone was not answering. Ethan was beside himself, imagining the most terrible scenarios. He was about to go looking for her when he heard the sound of the door opening. His daughter had returned, crying. It turned out that she had argued with her friend and had wandered the streets for a long time, not daring to come home. Instead of shouting, Ethan silently hugged her to his chest, and Sophia burst into tears, saying everything that was on her mind, how scared she was about the divorce, how lost she felt. That night they talked in the kitchen until dawn, and by morning Sophia seemed to have lifted a heavy burden from her soul. Their trust in each other grew even stronger. But when Ethan looked at his children in the morning, his purpose was restored. He reminded himself over and over again that he had someone to live for now, and nothing else mattered. Several months have passed since the divorce. Much has changed in the life of the Crow family. Gradually, the acute emotions have subsided, and everyday concerns have come to the fore. Ethan threw himself into the project of a small park, to which he was invited by a friend. In the mornings, after taking the children to school, he sat down to draw and sketch. And for the first time in many years, he felt inspired. The lines on the paper formed a harmonious plan of a green area with a playground and a cozy pavilion. Ethan even involved the children in the discussion. He asked their opinion on what they would like the playground to be like. Lucas enthusiastically suggested slides and a bungee jump, Sophia a corner for teenagers where they could just sit and talk. In the evenings, over dinner, they chatted about the project. Sophia sometimes looked at her father in surprise. He seemed to come alive, his eyes sparkling as he shared news, how he met with city architects, how he received praise for his idea of green lighting for the park. The daughter once remarked, "Dad, I've probably never seen you so happy." Ethan smiled sheepishly. "I just haven't done any serious work for a long time. It turns out I missed it." "And we missed you like this," Sophia added quietly, and Ethan felt a lump in his throat from gratitude. The daughter was gradually recovering from the shock, seeing that her father was nearby and that everything was working out for him. She herself became calmer. Lucas was also changing. Although he still missed his mother, his dad's attention and concern helped him cope. Ethan tried to spend as much time with the children as possible. They did their homework together, went to the park on weekends, or played board games at home. Now that Laura was not around, Ethan felt a special closeness to his son and daughter. They were united as a team. There were hard days, of course. Sometimes Ethan would lie awake at night, suddenly acutely aware of his loneliness. The house was different without Laura, quiet, as if empty. He knew that despite all the pain, part of him still mourned the lost dreams of a happy family. But when he looked at his children in the morning, he found purpose again. Work also helped heal his emotional wounds. Ethan met with former colleagues, attended seminars on the subject, and even spoke at public hearings several times, presenting his park project. His name appeared again in professional circles, and this reinforced his self-confidence. One day, after such a presentation, a representative of the municipality approached him. "Mr. Crow, your project has made an impression. We would like to invite you to continue collaborating with our urban planning department." Ethan felt his heart skip a beat. "I will be glad to continue working for the benefit of the city." That evening, as he was driving home, he found himself whistling while driving. It had been so long since he had felt this light. It was as if he had finally emerged from a long, stuffy tunnel into the fresh air. The children were waiting for him at home. Sophia was setting the table. She took on this responsibility on her own initiative, knowing that Dad often came home tired. Lucas was feeding the cat, humming something to himself. At dinner, the kids asked Ethan about his day, and he jokingly complained, "I'm swamped with work. I'll have to hire an assistant to cope with the fame." Lucas chuckled. "Dad, are you going to be a famous architect now?" "Oh, well, I'm not famous." Ethan waved it off. "But it's nice to be doing something important again." Sophia looked seriously. "We are proud of you." Ethan almost burst into tears at these words, but he held back and just nodded. "Thank you, dear." That night, while putting Lucas to bed, he heard the usual, "Dad, will you read a chapter?" And despite his fatigue, he took the book. The boy settled down next to him while his father read a fairy tale in a quiet voice. At some point, Lucas asked, "Did your mother see your project?" Ethan hesitated. "No, I don't think so." "It's a shame. She would have liked it too," Lucas sighed. Ethan patted his son on the head. "Maybe we'll show it someday." Lucas nodded and soon fell asleep. Ethan walked out of the room and ran into Sophia in the hallway. She said hesitantly, "I heard what Lucas said. Maybe you should really send your mom the photos. Maybe she'll be happy for you." Ethan smiled sadly. "I don't know if she needs it. She has her own life." Sophia quietly added, "She asked about you once. I didn't say almost anything. I didn't know if you wanted to." Ethan paused, then nodded. "It's okay, you can tell us. We have no more secrets." The daughter squeezed his hand lightly. "I love you, Dad." "And I you, Sophia," he whispered. After she disappeared into the room, Ethan stood in the hallway for a moment. He thought about how everything had changed in such a short time. The pain hadn't gone away completely. Sometimes at night, he found himself missing the days when Laura's laughter had filled the house. But that was in the past. Now he had children, a job, and freedom. Freedom to be himself without having to fit in with anyone. At this new stage of his life, Ethan felt that there was still a lot of unknown ahead, but he could handle it. He had already overcome the hardest part, which meant he could do more. In mid-spring, Lucas's English grades began to drop slightly. Ethan noticed this and became concerned. One day, he received a call from school. His son's class teacher asked him to come in for a talk. Ethan, of course, agreed, arranging for the next day after school. At the appointed time, he entered the school building. Lucas's school was small and cozy, with posters and drawings on the walls. He was shown to the English room, where the class teacher usually received parents. Ethan knocked and peered inside. A woman of about 40 sat at the teacher's desk, smiling pleasantly, her face expressing kindness and calm. She was wearing a light floral dress and thin-framed glasses, her hair neatly pinned up at the back of her head. Seeing Ethan, she stood up. "Good afternoon. You must be Lucas's father. Please come in." Ethan stepped through the door, and suddenly recognition hit him. The wide brown eyes, the soft features. "Claire," he blurted out in surprise. The woman looked at him and gasped. Ethan Crow? I can't believe it." They both stepped toward each other and exchanged a tentative hug, as much as school etiquette allowed. Ethan pulled away, still looking at his old friend in shock. "How many years?" "About 20 years have passed," he muttered. "About that," Claire laughed. "I never thought I'd meet you here. So Lucas is your son?" "Yes," Ethan smiled. "He said he adored Miss Robertson. I didn't expect it was you." Claire Robertson was his classmate in college. They were friends, and they participated in student theater productions together. Then their paths diverged. Ethan went to study architecture further. Claire changed her specialty to teaching and returned to her hometown. He heard out of the corner of his ear that she was teaching somewhere, but he did not think that fate would bring them together again. "Sit down," Claire motioned to a chair by the table. "I called you as a teacher, but now I don't even know if I can speak formally. This is so unexpected." Ethan sat up, feeling a warm wave of memories. Claire had hardly changed. Only the wrinkles around her eyes showed the experience, and her light brown hair had become shorter. But the same open smile and kind look. "Tell me, how are you?" They asked each other almost simultaneously, and both laughed. "Let's talk about Lucas first," Ethan suggested. "You called me for business." Claire nodded, switching to a professional business tone. "Yes, I wanted to discuss Lucas's progress. He is a very capable boy, lively, inquisitive. But lately I have noticed that he is absent-minded, often sad. His grades have dropped a little, not critical, but unusual for him." Ethan looked down. "I know what you mean. There have been big changes in our family. His mother and I got divorced a few months ago." Claire sighed softly. "I'm sorry. I guess something had happened. Children usually react strongly." "Yeah," Ethan rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Lucas is taking it hard. We're trying." He fell silent, not wanting to go into details. Claire sympathetically covered his hand with hers. "Sorry, I didn't want to get personal. It was important for me to understand the background. Now a lot is clear. I think he just needs a little time and support, and he will catch up on everything himself." Ethan looked at her warmly. "Thank you, Claire. I'm glad you're his teacher. He loves you. He always quotes, 'Miss Robertson said this, Miss Robertson showed that.'" Claire laughed. "Really? That's great to hear. He's a cool guy." They smiled at each other for a few seconds. Then Claire added quietly, "And how are you, Ethan?" He caught her sympathetic look and, unexpectedly for himself, answered honestly, "It varies, but now, mostly it's fine. I live for my children and work." Claire nodded. "I understand. I've been through this too." Ethan raised his eyebrows in surprise. "You got divorced too?" "Alas," she sighed. "The marriage didn't last long, no children, so I ended up devoting myself to school." "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "It's okay," Claire smiled a little sadly, "but I have a whole class of kids every year." Ethan felt how easy and calm it was to talk to her, as if those 20 years of separation had never happened. He suddenly felt a reluctance to interrupt the meeting. They also talked about Lucas, discussed how best to help him with his studies. Claire promised to support the boy in class, to involve him in activities more often to distract him from sad thoughts. Finally, when the business matters were exhausted, there was a pause. Both were clearly reluctant to say goodbye. "You know, we haven't seen each other for so long. Maybe we could have coffee sometime and talk," Ethan decided to suggest. "I'd be happy to," Claire beamed. "Even now, if you're not in a hurry. I don't have any more lessons today." Ethan glanced at his watch. There was still time before he had to pick up the kids. Great. Is there a cafe nearby? Yes, there is a quiet place around the corner. I often hang out there after work. 15 minutes later, they were sitting at a table in a small coffee shop with 2 cappuccinos. The spring sun was shining outside the window, and Ethan felt surprisingly light-hearted. They chatted non-stop. They discussed their classmates, who was where, and remembered funny stories from their youth. Claire laughed at his jokes, and he caught himself smiling almost constantly. When the conversation turned to the present, Claire asked cautiously, "It's probably not easy for you now, alone with 2 children." Ethan shrugged. "It can be hard, but the kids keep me afloat, and I have work again. In general, I live day by day. We'll see." Claire nodded understandingly. "The main thing is that you have wonderful children. Lucas is the son, and I didn't teach Sophia, but I heard that she is a very bright girl." "Yes, I'm happy that I have them," Ethan smiled softly. He looked at his friend. "And you? Alone now?" Claire looked away to her cup. "Yes, somehow it didn't work out anymore. Apparently, family isn't my thing. But I'm not complaining. I'm used to it." Ethan shook his head. "Don't say that. You deserve happiness no less than others." Claire was embarrassed and looked gratefully into his eyes. "Thank you, Ethan." They were silent for a moment, suddenly realizing that they were holding hands on the table. They both looked slightly embarrassed and pulled their hands away, then laughed at their awkwardness. "You know, I'm so glad we met," Claire said warmly. "I never thought our Lucas was your son. It's a small world." "You're welcome," Ethan smiled. "I'm also overjoyed. So many years, and you're still the same, Claire." "It's hardly the same," she shook her head. "But something must have remained." They talked for a while longer until Ethan noticed it was time to pick up the kids. He took out his phone as a parting shot. "Let's exchange numbers so we don't get lost." Certainly. They kept in touch with each other. Claire suddenly gave Ethan a quick hug. "Take care of yourself, do you hear?" There was such genuine concern in her voice that his heart ached again from the joy that he again had a friend nearby, understanding and kind. "I will," he answered hoarsely. "You too." After parting with her at the cafe, Ethan felt as if a new warm window had lit up in his life. He got into the car and thought about how strange it was that fate had brought them together again right now, when he needed support so much. Perhaps this was a sign that not only trials awaited him ahead, but also good, bright moments. Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Claire began to communicate a lot. They texted each other almost every day. Either Claire would send a funny photo from school, or Ethan would share news about a project or the kids' successes. It was easy and natural, as if the renewed friendship of their youth had only grown stronger with time. They met a few times after work, sometimes for a quick lunch, sometimes for an evening stroll along the waterfront. Ethan found himself looking forward to each of these dates, and that was what they were, even though they didn't explicitly call them that. One Saturday, Claire suggested, "Listen, let me come and visit you." I promised Lucas to give him a book on astronomy. We were talking about the planets. Ethan was a little nervous at first. He wasn't sure how the kids would take her appearance on their territory. But Lucas was delighted to learn about the opportunity to hang out with his favorite teacher outside of school. Sophia just shrugged, saying that she didn't care. Claire came in the afternoon with a homemade pie. Lucas immediately got her interested in showing him his drawings of the solar system. Sophia greeted him politely and disappeared into her room, citing her studies. Ethan and Claire stayed in the kitchen, drinking tea. "Don't be upset with Sophia," Ethan said quietly. "She's having a hard time accepting any changes yet." Claire nodded understandingly. "Everything is fine. It's probably hard for her to see. Strangers here." Ethan met her eyes. "You are not an outsider." Warmth spread between them. Claire looked down, embarrassed, but smiled. "You know, I was thinking, maybe you all could get a change of scenery for a day. I have a school trip to the Portland Zoo next week. Parents are welcome to come. Maybe you and the kids could come? I'll be there." The zoo, Ethan thought. We haven't been out together in a while. I think that's an idea." When he suggested this outing to the children, Lucas jumped for joy, but Sophia winced. "It's like a kindergarten. I think I'll pass." Ethan didn't insist, but on the day of the trip, Sophia still came out to the car, quietly muttering, "I'll go so as not to let Lucas go alone." Ethan just smiled to himself. The zoo was fun and noisy. Excited children were running around everywhere. The sun was shining. The cries of peacocks and the roar of a lion could be heard from the enclosures, attracting crowds of visitors. Lucas pulled Claire to the playful otters in the pool, then to the leisurely strolling elephants, delightedly telling her everything he knew about the animals. Even Sophia looked up from her phone a couple of times and smiled, watching the comical way the penguins were fed fish. Claire took on Lucas's entertainment. They fed the giraffes together, participated in a quiz. At first, Sophia kept to herself, buried in her phone, but gradually she also began to smile, looking at her enthusiastic brother. Ethan noticed how Claire threw him short, happy glances from time to time, as if she, too, was enjoying the family spirit of this outing. After the zoo, the whole group went to a street cafe for a bite to eat. Sophia suddenly started asking Claire about her father's school years. Was he diligent? The daughter asked with a spark of curiosity. Claire was happy to share a couple of funny stories, like how Ethan dared to climb into the campus pool at night, or how he set up scenery for a student play. Sophia giggled. "Dad, I didn't think you were so." Young and stupid, Ethan played along, pleased that his daughter was getting involved. Claire countered softly. He was wonderful, kind, talented, reliable, and he remained so. Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest at the words. Their eyes met. At that moment, Lucas exclaimed in delight, pointing somewhere behind them, and the magic of the moment broke into laughter. They returned home tired but happy. Sophia unexpectedly said goodbye to Claire. "Thank you, it was great." And she even smiled a little. Ethan noticed how Claire's eyes sparkled with joy. After the kids went into the house, Ethan walked Claire to her car. The sun was setting and the air smelled of spring. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For today, it means a lot to us." "Me too," Claire replied. "I had a wonderful time. You have wonderful children." "I'm glad that Sophia has gotten a little used to you," he admitted. Claire adjusted a strand of hair. "She's a smart girl. She just needs time." For a few seconds, they stood close to each other, and Ethan's heart began to beat faster. He wanted so much to hug her, to kiss her, but he was afraid to scare away the fragile balance. Claire, as if reading his thoughts, slowly rose on tiptoe and lightly touched his cheek with her lips. "See you soon, Ethan." He nodded, enchanted by her closeness. "See you soon, Claire." When her car disappeared around the corner, Ethan stood at the gate for a long time in thoughtful happiness. Life, once shattered into pieces, seemed to begin to gather into a new pattern, and in this pattern, Claire's face appeared more and more clearly. It was a cool evening. Ethan and Claire were sitting on the living room sofa after dinner, chatting quietly while the children did their homework. Their friendship was slowly turning into something more. Claire had stayed longer than usual tonight, and there was a gentle tension between her and Ethan, like before a first kiss. "Thank you for inviting me," Claire said, touching his arm lightly. "I feel good with you all." Ethan smiled. "You and I too." They moved slowly toward each other. Ethan raised his hand, stroked a strand of her hair. Claire closed her eyes. Their faces came closer. A few minutes ago, Laura had resolutely opened the front door of her former home. She wasn't even fully aware of what was pushing her to come unannounced, either her son's worries about a forgotten notebook or her own uncontrollable anxiety. As she drove across the city, her heart was pounding, and 1,000 thoughts and fears swarmed in her head. Laura appeared at the threshold of the living room. Seeing the two of them, she froze. Stunned, then anger mixed with pain flashed in her eyes. "What? What's going on here?" she asked quietly, her brows furrowed. Ethan and Claire pulled away from each other. Ethan jumped up. His heart sank. He hadn't expected his ex-wife to visit. Claire stood up too, looking around in confusion. Laura saw Claire. Who is this? Ethan stepped forward, shielding Claire, who looked embarrassed. Laura, why did you come without calling? He said dryly. I brought Lucas's notebook. He forgot it at my place. Laura clutched the school notebook in her hand. Her gaze darted between her husband and the unfamiliar woman. Who is this? Ethan let out a calm breath. This is Claire Robertson, Lucas's teacher, and an old friend of mine. Laura lifted her chin. Girlfriend, I see. Claire took a step forward, trying to defuse the situation. Hello, Laura. I'm very sorry that we met like this. I think I'll go. She looked around for her handbag. No, stop, Laura said suddenly, her eyes shining. Please stay. I want to understand what's going on here. Ethan frowned. Laura, that's enough. Don't make a scene in front of the kids. There are no children here, she blurted out. Sophia is upstairs. Lucas can't hear anything in his headphones. She narrowed her eyes, looking Claire up and down. So, not even a year has passed since the divorce, and you've already brought a woman into our house. Laura, Ethan said harshly, stop it. But she did not calm down, now turning directly to Claire. Do you know that you are destroying the family, or do you not care? Claire turned pale. Sorry, but your family has already been. That's not why I'm here. Mom, stop. A voice suddenly came from the stairs. Sophia was standing on the steps. She came down, clutching the railing. You have no right to say that. Laura fell silent in surprise, staring at her daughter. Sophia came closer. You destroyed the family yourself. And Dad deserves to be happy. Claire doesn't destroy him, she helps him. Sophia, Laura whispered, I understand you're angry with me, but... No, you don't understand. The daughter cried out, her eyes sparkling with tears. Do you think we don't remember anything? How did you leave us? How have you treated us? Laura turned even paler. I'm sorry. But Sophia did not listen. Dad finally smiles. Lucas smiles, and you come and ruin everything again, daughter. Laura took a step towards her, holding out her hand. Sophia retreated. Don't call me that. You haven't been our mother for a long time, and now you're also interfering with Dad's life. Ethan saw Laura stagger at the words, as if struck. He raised his hand. Sophia, that's enough. The daughter bit her lip, wiping her cheeks. She turned and ran out of the room onto the street. Ethan rushed after her. Sophia, he caught up with her on the porch. Sophia was sobbing, clutching her fists to her chest. Ethan hugged her and pressed her to himself. Quiet, dear. Everything is fine. I won't let her hurt you again, the daughter said through tears. Ethan patted her on the back. I'm fine. You shouldn't interfere. This is between adults. No, Sophia sobbed and pulled away, wiping away her tears. She needs to know how much it hurt us, too. She knows, believe me, he said quietly. Claire walked out of the house, holding her bag uncertainly. Ethan, I'm leaving. It's probably best this way. Ethan let go of his daughter and stepped toward Claire. Claire, please don't worry. Claire smiled sadly. Everything is fine. It seems that now is not the time. She touched his hand. Thank you for the evening. Sophia, you are a wonderful, strong girl. Hang in there. Sophia nodded, sniffling. Sorry that it happened this way. Claire just shook her head. She walked quickly to the car. Ethan cast a helpless look after her. Was this really going to ruin everything? Footsteps were heard behind her. Laura came out of the house. Her face was pale. Her eyes were red. Sophia, Ethan. Ethan turned to her, holding his shaking daughter by the shoulders. I think you better leave now. Laura nodded without arguing. She held out Lucas's notebook, which she was still holding. Here, a notebook. Ethan took it automatically. Laura looked at Sophia. I deserve everything you said. Just don't be angry, please. I love you. And Lucas, a lot. Sophia turned away silently. Laura's lips twitched. She turned to Ethan. Forgive me for everything. I see that you all have found your happiness. A bitter smile twisted her face. I won't bother you. She took a step towards her daughter, but Sophia moved away. Then Laura only said quietly, "I will wait until you can forgive me." And with her head down, she walked to her car. Ethan tightened his fingers on his daughter's shoulders. She watched her mother drive away, tears streaming down her cheeks again, tears of longing now. He realized that no matter how much pain Laura brought them, it was still impossible to tear her away from his daughter's heart. Sophia sobbed. "Maybe. Was I too cruel?" Ethan hugged her. "You said what you felt. She needed to hear the truth." Sophia hid her face in his chest. "I want her to leave us alone, but I also feel sorry for her." Ethan kissed the top of his daughter's head. "I know, darling. Me too." They stood on the porch for a moment, huddled together, watching the darkness fall. Finally, Ethan said, "Let's go home." Lucas probably didn't understand anything and was scared. Together they returned to the house, where indeed a worried Lucas was waiting for them with 1,000 questions. Ethan explained that his mother was simply upset and had arrived unannounced. Choosing his words, he reassured his son. But the biggest wound of the evening was the fading disappointment in Claire's eyes. Ethan knew that now he had to prove to her that he was truly ready to move on, and that their relationship was not a mistake. That night he barely slept, replaying what had happened. However, in a strange way, the encounter with Laura and Sophia's reaction finally put something in place. The past was closing, and he needed to boldly step into the future, not allowing anything to destroy the happiness he had found. The next day, after taking the kids to school, Ethan immediately called Claire. He was worried that after the previous day, she might become distant. Fortunately, she answered, although she sounded wary. "Can we meet?" he asked without wasting time. Claire hesitated for a moment, then agreed. "Let's go. After work, in the park at our place." "I'll be there," Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. All day he could hardly find a place for himself. The hours dragged on painfully slowly. Finally, in the evening, leaving the children in the care of a neighbor, he went to the park where he and Claire sometimes walked. She was already waiting on a bench under a spreading oak tree. At the sight of Ethan, Claire stood up, crossing her arms over her chest, a gesture of defense or nervousness. "Hello," she said quietly. Ethan moved closer, trying to kiss her on the cheek, but she pulled away slightly. His heart ached. "Claire, I'm so sorry about yesterday," he began immediately. "Laura shouldn't have barged in like that. I feel terrible that you got hit." Claire shook her head. "It's not your fault. It's just... Your family is a complicated story. Maybe you shouldn't start a new relationship yet." Ethan was frightened by these words. "No, please don't say that. I want this relationship. I want you." He stepped closer, looking into her eyes. "Yes, I have children. My ex-wife is baggage. I understand that it is hard for you." Claire looked sadly at their intertwined fingers. "It's not just me. I see how your daughter is protecting you. It's not easy for her to accept a new woman next to her father." "Sophia is very kind to you, really," Ethan said hotly. "She enjoyed our time together. That flare-up she had last night was at Mom, not you." Claire smiled weakly. "She's a wonderful girl, but I don't want to be the cause of scandals between you and Laura. I'm Lucas's teacher, and I still have to work with your ex-wife if she suddenly decides." Ethan took her hands. "Laura won't make a scene. Yesterday, I think she understood everything. She has her own proud I, too." Claire looked sadly at their intertwined fingers. "I'm just very afraid of hurting you. You've been through so much." Ethan felt a growing despair. Would she refuse to be with him because of these fears? He gently touched her face with his palm. "Claire, look at me." She looked up. He continued, "What I went through, yes, was terrible. But you were like a light coming through the darkness. I laugh again. I believe again that I can be happy. You gave it to me." Claire pressed her cheek into his palm, her eyes shining. "You made me happy too. I never thought I could get so attached again." Ethan seized on the word. "Then why back down? Let's try. Let's be careful, without haste. I'm not asking you to immediately become a stepmother to my children or anything like that. Just be with me. The rest will follow." Claire was silent for a few seconds, then asked quietly, "Do you really want this?" "With all my heart," he answered, without a moment's hesitation. Determination appeared in her eyes. The corners of her lips twitched into a smile. "Okay, I want to be with you too, Ethan." He laughed with relief and joy and pulled her into his arms. Claire wrapped her arms around his neck, and they finally kissed, the long, tender kiss they had both been waiting for. For a moment, the world around them ceased to exist. When they pulled away, Ethan whispered, "I promise I won't disappoint you." Claire shook her head. "I don't doubt it for a second." They stood for a while, pressed close to each other under the tree crowns, then, holding hands, walked along the park path, discussing how best to arrange everything. The spring park quietly rustled with young leaves. The air was filled with the aroma of bird cherry and freshness. "Maybe I should talk to Sophia," Claire suggested. "Convince her that I'm not trying to take over as mom." "I think we can explain it to her together," Ethan replied. "Although, after yesterday, it seems like she's already made up her mind." Indeed, when Ethan and Claire returned home, they found Sophia and Lucas preparing dinner. The children had decided to make a surprise. Seeing Claire, Lucas happily ran up to hug her. "You've come to us again. Hooray." Sophia stood at the stove, stirring the pasta. She glanced at her father and Claire, then said, a little tensely, "Claire, stay for dinner. We've cooked a lot." Ethan walked up to his daughter and gently touched her shoulder. "Are you sure? If you're against it, we'll understand." Sophia shrugged, avoiding looking at him. "I don't mind. Sorry about yesterday. I went too far." Claire came closer. "Sophia, you have nothing to apologize for. You protected your family. That is worthy of respect." Sophia looked at her in surprise and smiled openly for the first time. "Thank you for understanding." Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. He put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "I love you." "I know, Dad," she muttered embarrassedly and smiled slightly at Claire. That dinner was almost like a family affair. Sophia told funny stories from school. Lucas chattered incessantly. Ethan exchanged warm and grateful glances with Claire. It soon became clear that the children had accepted Claire. Lucas asked point-blank if Miss Robertson would visit them often, to which Ethan replied with a smile, "I hope so." Sophia only clarified, "You're dating now, right?" "Yes," Ethan answered honestly, squeezing Claire's hand under the table. The daughter nodded. "Okay then, just no snotty kisses in front of us, okay?" she added with teenage frankness. Everyone laughed and the tension finally eased. In the days and weeks that followed, Laura kept her word. She did not interfere. When meeting with the children, she no longer asked unnecessary questions about Claire. It seemed that she had truly resigned herself. Sophia visited her mother several times, returning thoughtful but calm. Lucas also gradually improved his relationship. A child cannot stay angry with a parent for long. But he also became very attached to Claire, often talking about her in the presence of his mother Laura, only smiled sadly and did not comment. Summer was approaching. Ethan, sitting with Claire on the porch one evening after the children had fallen asleep, suddenly felt truly happy. He looked at the profile of the woman he loved in the moonlight and said quietly, "Thank you." "For what?" she asked in surprise, turning her face to him. "For coming back into my life," he replied. Claire pressed herself against his shoulder. "I think I was always in it. We were just waiting for the moment." He hugged her, and they sat in silence, enjoying the peace. There was still a lot ahead of them, good and difficult, as always in life. But Ethan was calm. Now there were those for whom it was worth living and changing, and he was ready to go into the future with gratitude for this new, happy turn of fate. A year has passed. Much has changed in Ethan Crow's life. His city park project has been successfully implemented. A green oasis with a playground and a cozy pavilion has become a popular place to relax. Ethan has once again found a name in the professional community and got a job at an architectural firm on flexible terms so that he can devote time to his children. The park was officially opened on a warm summer day. The mayor stood at the microphone on stage, giving a speech about the importance of city projects. When the mayor handed the floor over to the chief architect, Ethan, a little nervous, stepped up to the microphone. He thanked his colleagues for their trust, the city authorities for supporting the project, and then, with a slight smile, added, "And of course, thanks to my family for the inspiration." In the crowd, Sophia proudly puffed out her chest, and Lucas loudly applauded his father, causing good-natured laughter from the audience. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest and concluded his speech with the wish that the new park would become a place of happy memories for all city residents. Families with children were walking along the paths around, already trying out the new swings and carousels. A cheerful hubbub was heard everywhere. The best gift for an architect is to see his creation come to life and bring joy to people. After the official part, the children rushed to him. "Dad, you were the coolest," Lucas shouted, throwing himself on his neck. "Yes, our star architect," Sophia teased and kissed him on the cheek. Claire stood a little further away, looking at them proudly and tenderly. Ethan pulled her towards him, hugging her around the waist. "I couldn't have done it without you." He kissed Claire lightly. Sophia rolled her eyes, but smiled. Okay, we're already used to it." They all laughed. A little further away, under the shade of a tree, stood another observer. Laura had come to the opening uninvited, quietly, almost incognito. She wanted to see how Ethan would perform, what the children looked like. She watched her former family take pictures at the new pavilion. Ethan had his arm around Claire and the kids. They were laughing. Sophia was telling her father something, waving her arms. Lucas was pulling Claire to look at the fountain. The four of them seemed so close. Laura felt a pang of acute melancholy. At that moment, she clearly understood. She herself had placed herself outside this circle of happiness. The price of her decisions was here, alone, watching someone else's happiness, which was once available to her. She came closer as Ethan stepped away from the group to answer questions from the reporters. Sophia noticed her mother first. The girl nodded at her, reservedly, but without hostility. Lucas waved. "Hi, Mom." Laura smiled and came over. Claire turned to her, smiling easily and friendly. "Congratulations, Laura," Claire said quietly. "Ethan is the hero of the day." "Yes," Laura looked away to Ethan, who was shaking hands with an official in the distance. "I'm happy for him." And she was truly happy through the bitterness of loss. There was a sincere joy for the man she once loved and whom she had so thoughtlessly hurt. Sophia suggested to her mother, "Mom, are we going to an ice cream parlor later with us?" Laura shook her head. "No, honey, you have your own company." She ran her hand through her son's hair. "I just dropped by for a minute. We'll call later, okay?" Lucas hugged her. "Okay, Mom." Laura inhaled the scent of his hair, holding back tears. Then she released her son and looked around at the children and Claire. "Thank you for taking care of them." Claire nodded slightly. "They are wonderful. We all try to be happy for them." Laura swallowed the lump in her throat. "This is right." Ethan, who had finished the interview, came over and was surprised to see Laura among his own. "Hello," he said calmly. "Congratulations, Ethan. The park is magnificent," she said sincerely. "Thank you." They stood in silence for a few seconds. Laura plucked up her courage. "You know, I really regret the past, and I'm glad that you all found your happiness." Ethan looked at his ex-wife. Her eyes were full of tears, but her face was sincere. He nodded slightly. "Thank you, Laura." No more words were needed. Laura turned to the children. "See you soon, my dear. Love you." "Bye, Mom," they answered in unison. Laura walked away, feeling her past being released with every step. Yes, she was alone, but perhaps by admitting her mistakes and letting go of her regrets, she too could one day start over. For now, all she could do was move on and be grateful that her children were smiling. Ethan watched Laura go. Claire gently took his arm. The children hugged him from either side. In that moment, he realized that he didn't feel anger or pain, only calm compassion and release. "Everything okay?" Claire whispered, looking into his face. Ethan smiled at her, that same warm smile that had been illuminating his features more and more often lately. "Yes, Now everything is fine. Half an hour later, the whole group was sitting at a large table in the kids' favorite ice cream parlor. Lucas had smeared vanilla ice cream on his nose, making Claire cry. Sophia was taking pictures of everyone on her phone, promising to post the cutest family selfie. "Just don't give me my frozen mustache," Ethan asked, laughing and wiping his smiling son's face with a napkin. Sophia snorted. "Dad, this is the highlight of the shot." Claire, holding Ethan's hand under the table, watched the children with tenderness. She felt part of this family, and this warmth filled her heart. "You know," she said suddenly, "maybe we could all go to the ocean together in the summer. I've long wanted to show you Cannon Beach on the Pacific coast." "Hooray, the sea!" Lucas jumped up on the spot. "I've never been to the ocean before." Sophia smiled. "Sounds great." Ethan looked at Claire, full of enthusiasm, and felt a surge of happiness. "Let's go. We love spontaneous adventures now." At the next table, someone turned around at the sound of their laughter. The Crow family, renewed, matured through hardship, was beginning to write a new chapter in their story. Ethan hugged his loved ones tighter, feeling the deepest gratitude for every moment they had lived, for every trial that had made them stronger and closer. His heart was full of love and determination to appreciate this gift of fate. A new round of life had begun, and it promised them all many good things ahead. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.